The glass walls of the underground command center gleamed with the reflection of 1,000 blinking monitors. Lena Pham sat at her terminal, eyes scanning the incoming data streams that poured in from across Neo-Saigon. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, occasionally tapping to enlarge a notification or dismiss an alert. 27 years old, with her hair pulled back in a tight ponytail and a perpetual furrow between her brows. Lena had spent the last 5 years as a data engineer, responsible for monitoring the Aegis system. In 2075, the Aegis algorithm was the invisible hand that guided virtually all aspects of daily life in Neo-Saigon. Transportation networks, healthcare facilities, security systems, environmental controls, all operated under the watchful eye of the most sophisticated predictive system ever created. Aegis didn't just manage infrastructure. It predicted needs, prevented accidents, and protected citizens with a near-perfect safety record. Or so everyone believed. Lena's terminal chimed with a soft alert. She glanced at the notification. Potential safety anomaly detected in Residential Zone 7. Her eyes immediately darted to the risk assessment marker. 0%, absolute safety. She frowned. That doesn't make sense, she muttered, leaning closer to the screen. A potential safety anomaly with 0 risk? The contradiction nagged at her. She began typing, pulling up raw data feeds from Zone 7's environmental sensors, traffic management systems, and residential health monitors. Something was off. The data stream from several key infrastructure nodes appeared fragmented, with unexplained gaps, not complete failures. Those would trigger automatic maintenance protocols, but subtle inconsistencies that the system seemed to be glossing over. Min, are you seeing this? Lena called across the monitoring floor to her colleague. Min Yu, a heavy-set man with perpetually disheveled hair, swiveled in his chair. Seeing what? Zone 7 data anomalies. The system flagged it but rated it 0 risk. Min shrugged. If Aegis says it's safe, it's safe. Probably just a routine packet loss during transmission. The algorithm compensates for that. Lena nodded, but the unease remained. 5 years of working with Aegis had taught her to trust the algorithm's judgment. It processed more variables than any human could comprehend and had a track record of 99.98% accuracy in risk assessment. But something about this particular alert felt wrong. She pulled up historical data from Zone 7, scanning for patterns. 3 weeks ago, there had been a minor transportation incident. A self-driving shuttle had skidded slightly on a rain-slick roadway. 2 weeks ago, a medical dispensary robot had administered a slightly incorrect medication dosage to an elderly resident. Though well within non-harmful parameters, last week, a false fire alarm had triggered in the lower levels. Each incident, taken alone, was negligible. Together, they formed a pattern that Aegis should have recognized. Lena initiated a deeper scan, attempting to access the algorithm's decision-making logs to understand why it had assigned a 0 risk value. Access denied. Administrator privileges required. She sat back, surprised. As a Level 3 data engineer, she had clearance to review most of Aegis's operational logs. This restriction was unusual. Her desk phone rang. Pham speaking, she answered. Engineer Pham, this is Director Tran. The clipped voice of Neo-Saigon's Aegis Operations Director came through clearly. I see you're running some non-standard queries on the Zone 7 data stream. Lena blinked, surprised at the rapid response. Yes, sir. I noticed some inconsistencies in the... Those inconsistencies are being addressed by the system. Director Tran interrupted. Aegis has already compensated for the data variances. Risk assessment is 0. Please return to your standard monitoring duties. But sir, Lena persisted, the pattern suggests. Engineer Pham. His voice cooled several degrees. Aegis's assessment capabilities far exceed those of even our most talented human operators. If the algorithm says it's safe, then it's safe. Focus on actual alerts that require human attention. The line went dead before she could respond. Lena stared at her screen, the contradiction still blinking at her. Potential safety anomaly detected, 0%. Absolute safety. Director Tran's dismissal only intensified her concern. Why would the operations director personally intervene over a routine data inconsistency? As her shift ended, Lena copied the alert data to her personal device, a minor protocol violation, but one that nagged at her professional integrity. Something wasn't right, and she couldn't simply ignore it because the algorithm said so. Her apartment was located in Residential Zone 3, a mid-tier living complex 20 levels below the surface of Neo-Saigon. Like most of the city's 10 million inhabitants, Lena lived underground, in the vast network of subterranean structures that had been built after rising sea levels and increasingly violent typhoons had made surface living untenable for all but the wealthiest citizens. Her home was small but efficient, a one-bedroom unit with minimalist furnishings and a single window that displayed an artificial view of what had once been the Saigon River. The only personal touches were a shelf of antique printed books, a rarity in the digital age, and a small collection of pre-flood photographs showing her grandparents standing proudly before the old Saigon landmarks. Lena kicked off her shoes and settled at her personal workstation. The apartment's AI assistant greeted her with a gentle chime. "Good evening. Lena, your preferred dinner has been prepared. Shall I serve it now, or would you prefer to wait?" "Wait, please," she replied absently. Already connecting her personal device to the workstation, the data she'd copied from work appeared on her screen. Without the constraints of Aegis's monitoring systems, she could examine it more freely. The anomalies became more apparent, not just data gaps, but strange patterns in the information that was present. Health monitoring data from Zone 7 residents showed subtle irregularities, slightly elevated heart rates, minor sleep disruptions, small increases in stress hormones. Nothing that would trigger medical alerts individually, but collectively suggesting a population under some kind of environmental stress. More concerning were the infrastructure logs. Temperature regulators in Zone 7 had been fluctuating within normal parameters, but constantly pushing the upper limits. Oxygen recirculation efficiency had dropped by 2.3% over the past month. Again, within acceptable ranges, but showing a clear downward trend. And, most worrying, trace amounts of industrial chemicals were appearing in the air quality monitors, just below the threshold that would trigger automatic filtration upgrades. None of these issues alone warranted emergency action. Combined, they painted a picture of a residential zone experiencing multiple cascading small failures, exactly the kind of pattern Aegis was designed to identify and address before it became critical. So why had the algorithm declared absolute safety? Lena leaned back in her chair, considering her options. She could file a formal report challenging Aegis's assessment, but after Director Tran's call, she suspected such a report would be buried. She could approach the Residential Safety Committee, but they relied entirely on Aegis for their decision-making and would likely defer to the algorithm. There was one other option, though it crossed lines she'd previously been unwilling to cross. Lena opened an encrypted messaging channel and composed a carefully worded post to a forum she'd discovered years ago but had never participated in. seeking technical consultation regarding Aegis environmental monitoring discrepancies in a residential zone. System flagging anomalies, but assigning 0 risk. Need access to hidden log data. Priority, medium-high. She hesitated before hitting send. The forum was frequented by those who operated in the gray areas of Neo-Saigon's tightly controlled information networks. Hackers, data specialists, and technology dissidents who questioned the city's reliance on algorithmic governance. Contacting them could jeopardize her career, possibly even lead to criminal charges for undermining public safety systems. But if there really was a safety issue in Zone 7 that Aegis was somehow missing or, worse, deliberately ignoring. She pressed send. Within minutes, a response appeared. Interesting discrepancy. Could examine further. Meet tomorrow. 20 o'clock, Cafe Circuit in Zone 5, Level 4. Ask for a table with proper lighting. We'll find you. Shadow. Lena closed the channel, her heart racing slightly. She had just taken her first step into a world she'd previously viewed with professional disdain. Those who didn't trust the algorithms that had kept Neo-Saigon functioning safely for decades. Yet, the unease that had started with that contradictory alert wouldn't leave her. If the algorithm said it was safe, it was supposed to be safe. But what if the algorithm was wrong? The next day at work passed with excruciating slowness. Lena performed her monitoring duties with mechanical precision, carefully avoiding any further queries into Zone 7 that might alert Director Tran. Throughout her shift, 4 more minor incidents were logged in the zone. A transportation pod arriving 3 minutes late, a waste recycling unit reporting a processing delay, a public entertainment screen glitching briefly, a security door requiring 2 scan attempts before opening. All were automatically classified as routine operational variances, requiring no action. To anyone else, they would indeed seem trivial. To Lena, they were additional data points in an increasingly concerning pattern. As her shift ended, Min stopped by her workstation. "Hey, a group of us are heading to Zone 2 for drinks. Want to join?" "Thanks, but I have plans." Lena replied, gathering her things. Min raised an eyebrow. "You never have plans." "First time for everything," she said with a forced smile. "Does it have anything to do with whatever you were so worried about yesterday? The Zone 7 thing?" Lena paused. "No, just meeting an old friend." Min studied her face for a moment. "Look, Lena, I've been doing this job 3 years longer than you. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the algorithm is smarter than we are. That's the whole point. We're just the human backup, the fail-safe that's never actually needed. Don't stress yourself over normal system operations." "You're probably right," Lena conceded, not wanting to prolong the conversation. "I know I'm right. The algorithm's never wrong. That's why we're all still alive down here." He grinned and walked away. Cafe Circuit was located in one of the busier commercial corridors of Zone 5, a mid-level area frequented by technical professionals and corporate middle management. The cafe was designed to evoke pre-flood nostalgia, with actual wooden tables, a luxury, soft ambient lighting, and human servers supplementing the automated systems. Lena arrived precisely at 20 o'clock, requested a table with proper lighting as instructed, and was led to a corner booth partially screened from the rest of the establishment by decorative digital foliage. She ordered a coffee and waited, scanning the room nervously. 10 minutes passed, then 20. She was beginning to think she'd been stood up when someone slid into the seat across from her. "Engineer Pham, I presume?" The woman who joined her was not what Lena had expected. She'd imagined someone who matched the hacker stereotype, young, disheveled. with the nervous energy of someone who lived outside society's boundaries. Instead, she faced a woman in her mid-40s, with close-cropped gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and the calm demeanor of a university professor. She wore the standard gray coveralls of a maintenance technician, the kind that blended into the background of Neo-Saigon's underground corridors. "Your shadow?" Lena asked quietly. The woman smiled slightly. "One of my many digital personas. You can call me Tam. No need for last names." A server approached, and Tam ordered a tea without looking at the menu. "So," she said once they were alone again, "you've noticed something the almighty Aegis has missed, or perhaps something it's chosen to ignore. Tell me." Lena hesitated, suddenly aware of how far outside protocol she had ventured. Tam seemed to sense her reluctance. "Your message mentioned environmental monitoring discrepancies. Zone 7, yes? I took the liberty of doing some preliminary research. 7 small incidents in the past month, all classified as independent anomalies, all within acceptable parameters. Yet, collectively, they suggest a developing environmental hazard." Tam sipped her tea, watching Lena over the rim of the cup. "Am I on the right track?" Lena exhaled slowly. "Yes, that's exactly it. And when I tried to access the algorithm's decision logs to understand why it wasn't connecting these incidents, I was blocked. Then the operations director personally contacted me to tell me to drop it." "Interesting. Director Tran himself?" Tam's eyes narrowed slightly. "That suggests your query triggered a security flag of some kind. But why would a routine data verification trigger security protocols?" "That," Tam said, placing her cup down precisely, "is the right question. And to answer it, we'll need to see what's in those hidden logs." She reached into her pocket and slid a small data chip across the table. "This will give you temporary access to a back door I've established in the Aegis monitoring network. It won't get you administrative privileges, but it will allow you to view shadow copies of the logs that are being kept from you." Lena stared at the chip. "This is illegal. I could lose my job. I could be prosecuted." "Yes," Tam agreed calmly. "And people in Zone 7 could be in danger because an algorithm someone has tampered with says they're perfectly safe. Your choice." Lena picked up the chip, turning it over in her fingers. "How do you know so much about Aegis? About accessing shadow copies of restricted logs?" Tam's expression remained neutral, but something flickered behind her eyes. "Let's just say I was there when they built it, before they changed it." "Changed it? Changed what?" "Its priorities." Tam stood, leaving payment for her tea on the table. "Use the access I've given you within the next 48 hours. After that, the back door will close. Be careful what network you connect from. Your work terminal will flag the unauthorized access immediately." "Wait," Lena said, rising slightly. "How do I contact you again?" "You don't. I'll contact you if what you find warrants further discussion." Tam adjusted her maintenance coveralls. "And Engineer Pham? Trust your instincts. The algorithm isn't infallible. Neither are the people who control it." With that, she walked away, blending seamlessly into the evening crowd of the commercial corridor. Lena returned to her apartment, the data chip burning a hole in her pocket. Using it would cross a line she had never imagined crossing when she joined Aegis operations 5 years ago. Back then, fresh out of the Neo-Saigon Technical Institute with top honors, she had believed wholeheartedly in the system. The algorithms that managed their underground city had saved humanity from the environmental catastrophes that had made the surface virtually uninhabitable. They maintained the delicate balance of resources, energy, and life support that kept 10 million people alive beneath the earth. Questioning them had seemed not just foolish, but ungrateful. Yet here she was, about to use an illegal backdoor to access restricted data because something didn't feel right. She inserted the chip into her personal workstation and followed the activation instructions Tam had included. A new interface appeared, similar to her work terminal but with subtle differences. The Aegis logo in the corner was slightly distorted, the colors off by a shade. Lena navigated to the Zone 7 monitoring logs, her heart pounding. The backdoor worked as promised, revealing data streams that had been invisible to her standard access. What she found sent a chill down her spine. The health monitoring network in Zone 7 wasn't just showing minor anomalies. It had been systematically purged of critical data. Entire residents were simply missing from the system, not marked as relocated or deceased, just absent, as if they had never existed. The environmental sensors told an even more disturbing story. The fluctuations she'd noticed weren't random variations. They followed a pattern that matched industrial coolant leakage from the deep maintenance levels beneath Zone 7. Traces of hydrogen sulfide, methane, and several synthetic compounds used in the city's waste reclamation systems were increasing at a steady rate. Individually, each reading remained below emergency thresholds. Collectively, they pointed to a serious infrastructure failure that was slowly poisoning the residential zone. Most damning of all were the algorithm's own logs. Aegis had initially flagged the situation as a Level 2 hazard with an 87% risk assessment, requiring immediate evacuation and emergency repair protocols. Then, exactly 3.2 seconds later, the assessment had been manually overridden. The new parameters classified the situation as observational only, with a risk factor of 0%. The override authorization code belonged to Aegis Global Corporation's executive suite. Lena sat back, her mind racing. This wasn't a system failure or a glitch in the algorithm. This was deliberate. Someone at the highest levels of Aegis Global had manually instructed the system to ignore a developing environmental crisis that threatened thousands of lives. But why? She dug deeper, following the trail of administrative commands. The initial hazard detection had triggered an automated message to Aegis Global's infrastructure division, requesting emergency maintenance funds for a major repair operation beneath Zone 7. The override had come immediately after that funding request. The picture became clearer. Someone had decided that fixing the problem would be too expensive, too disruptive, or too embarrassing to the company's perfect safety record. So they had simply changed the algorithm's assessment, betting that the issue would remain below critical thresholds long enough to implement a cheaper, quieter solution. Or perhaps to delay action until the next fiscal quarter, when new maintenance budgets would be approved. They were gambling with people's lives to protect the bottom line. Lena's hands trembled as she downloaded the evidence. The implications were staggering. Aegis wasn't just a neutral algorithm making objective safety assessments. It was a tool being manipulated by corporate interests willing to endanger citizens for financial gain. Her secure messaging channel pinged with an incoming message. "Found what you needed?" "Shadow," Lena replied. "Yes, it's worse than I thought. Manual override of hazard detection, corporate authorization. Not surprised. Need to meet again. Data indicates critical timeline. Tomorrow, 15 o'clock, maintenance level B. Section 12, Junction 7. Come alone. Bring the evidence." Lena hesitated. Maintenance level B was restricted, deep below the residential zones. If she was caught there without authorization, she'd face serious consequences. But the evidence she'd uncovered demanded action. and she wasn't sure who she could trust within official channels. "I'll be there," she replied. Sleep eluded her that night. The foundation of her professional life, her belief in the integrity of the systems that kept Neo-Saigon safe, had been shattered. If Aegis could be manipulated to ignore a developing environmental crisis in Zone 7, what other dangers were being concealed beneath reassuring green indicators and 0% risk assessments? When morning came, Lena called in sick to work for the first time in her career. She couldn't face her colleagues, couldn't sit at her terminal pretending everything was normal while knowing what she now knew. Instead, she spent the morning organizing the evidence she'd gathered and preparing for her meeting with Tam. Accessing Maintenance Level B required bypassing several security checkpoints. Lena used her engineer's credentials to enter the maintenance elevator, then followed Tam's detailed instructions to bypass the biometric scan at Level B. The deeper she descended into Neo-Saigon's infrastructure, the older and more utilitarian the surroundings became. The polished surfaces and ambient lighting of the residential zones gave way to exposed conduits, humming machinery, and harsh industrial illumination. Junction 7 was a nexus of massive pipes and conduits, the arteries and veins of the city's life support systems. The air was warm and carried a faint metallic taste that made Lena uneasy, especially given what she now knew about the environmental contamination in Zone 7. Tam was already waiting, still in her maintenance coveralls, but now accompanied by a man Lena didn't recognize. Tall and thin, with sharp features and watchful eyes. He wore the blue uniform of an Aegis medical technician. "This is Dr. Min Hoang," Tam introduced him. "He's been monitoring the health impacts of the Zone 7 contamination." Dr. Hoang nodded gravely. "Engineer Pham, thank you for bringing this to light. I've been trying to raise alarms through official channels for weeks, but my reports keep getting classified as inconclusive or statistically insignificant." Dr. Hoang works at the medical center in Zone 7, Tam explained. "He's been treating residents for symptoms of chemical exposure that don't appear in any official health monitoring data. Because the data is being purged," Lena said, understanding dawning. "I found evidence that entire residents are being erased from the health monitoring network." "Precisely," Dr. Hoang confirmed. "Patients come to me with respiratory distress, skin irritation, headaches, all consistent with exposure to the industrial chemicals you identified. I log their symptoms and treatment in the medical system. The next day, those records are gone, replaced with generic diagnoses like seasonal allergies or stress-related complaints." Lena's blood ran cold. "How many people are affected?" "At least 300 that I've personally treated. Likely many more who haven't sought medical attention yet. The symptoms start subtly. Most people attribute them to ordinary ailments. But they're getting worse. Last week, I had 2 patients with acute respiratory failure that required emergency intervention." "Did they survive?" Lena asked quietly. Dr. Huang's expression tightened. "Yes, but they were relocated immediately afterward, transferred to a specialized care facility. According to the records, I've been unable to contact them or verify their location." Tam, who had been silently observing their exchange, spoke up. "Show her what you found in the logs, Lena." Lena pulled out her datapad and displayed the evidence she'd downloaded the night before. The original hazard detection, the override command, the authorization code. They're choosing profit over people. She concluded, a proper repair operation would cost billions, disrupt services across multiple zones, and damage Aegis Global's perfect safety record. So they changed the algorithm's assessment instead. Dr. Huang studied the data, his face growing darker. This is criminal negligence, corporate homicide, and it's going to get much worse very soon. Tam said grimly. Dr. Huang's medical data combined with your environmental readings suggests we're approaching a critical threshold. When certain chemical combinations reach specific concentrations, the effects become exponentially more dangerous. We're seeing the early indicators now. How much time do we have? Lena asked. Based on the rate of increase in the contamination levels? 3 days, maybe 4, before we see mass casualties. Tam's expression was deadly serious. The company is probably planning a controlled evacuation just before that point, quietly relocating residents while claiming it's for routine maintenance or infrastructure upgrades. They'll fix the leak, air out the zone, then move everyone back in with some story about system improvements. But people are already sick. Lena protested. Some may have permanent damage, and if your timeline is off, if the contamination accelerates. Exactly. Dr. Huang said. We can't wait for Aegis Global to decide when it's cost-effective to save lives. We need to force their hand now. How? Lena asked. We have evidence, but who do we take it to? The Safety Regulatory Board is packed with former Aegis executives. The news networks rely on Aegis for their operational funding. The mayor's office defers to Aegis on all infrastructure decisions. We don't need to convince the authorities, Tam said, a hard edge entering her voice. We need to reset the algorithm, return it to its original programming before the override. If Aegis itself declares a level 2 hazard, the evacuation and repair protocols will activate automatically. The company won't be able to stop it without publicly admitting their countermanding safety measures. Lena stared at her. Reset the algorithm? That would require access to the central data core. It's the most secure facility in Neo-Saigon. Yes, Tam agreed. Which is why we need you. As an Aegis engineer, you have physical access privileges that Dr. Huang and I don't. With your credentials and the backdoor exploits I've developed, we can reach the core and implement the reset. That's not just illegal. Lena said slowly. That's classified as technological terrorism. The penalties are less severe than the mass casualty event that will occur if we do nothing. Dr. Huang interrupted. I took an oath to do no harm. Sometimes that means taking action when others won't. Lena fell silent, weighing her options. Everything she'd worked for, her career, her reputation, her future, would be destroyed if she participated in this plan. She might face years in a detention facility, yet the alternative was to walk away knowing that hundreds, possibly thousands of lives were at risk because corporate executives had decided their safety wasn't worth the expense of proper repairs. If we do this, she said finally, we need to be absolutely certain. We need irrefutable evidence that can't be buried afterward. We need to show not just that there's a hazard, but that they knew about it and deliberately concealed it. Tam nodded approvingly. Now you're thinking like someone who wants to change the system, not just work within it. She pulled out her own datapad. I've been gathering that evidence for longer than you know. Dr. Huang has been collecting biological samples from his patients, documenting the progression of symptoms. And I have access to earlier versions of the override commands. This isn't the first time they've done this. Just the first time it's escalated to potentially lethal levels. Who are you really? Lena asked, studying the older woman with new eyes. You're not just some rogue hacker. Tam's expression softened slightly. I was the lead environmental systems architect for Aegis when it was first implemented. I designed the safety protocols, the hazard detection algorithms, the emergency response systems. When I realized how the corporation was modifying my work, changing assessment parameters to prioritize cost efficiency over human safety. I objected, strenuously. They offered me a choice: accept a generous retirement package and sign a non-disclosure agreement, or face fabricated charges of data manipulation. She chose a third option, Dr. Huang said with a hint of admiration. She took early retirement, signed their papers, then created a new identity and went underground to monitor what they were doing with her system. Shadow isn't just a hacker handle, Tam explained. It's what I've become, a shadow in the system, watching, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to expose what Aegis Global has done to the algorithm that was supposed to protect this city. Lena took a deep breath. When do we do this? Tomorrow night, Tam replied. The graveyard shift has the fewest personnel in the central data core. Dr. Huang will be on duty at the medical center, monitoring for any sudden escalation in symptoms. You and I will access the core, implement the reset, and ensure the evacuation protocols activate properly. And after that, Tam's eyes met hers directly. After that, you make a choice. Return to your life. Claim you were coerced or deceived. Cooperate with their investigation. Or join us in making sure this never happens again. Not in Zone 7, not anywhere in Neo-Saigon. Lena nodded slowly. I'll be ready. As she made her way back to her apartment. Navigating through the twisting corridors and crowded transport pods of the underground city, Lena felt as though she was seeing Neo-Saigon for the first time. The marvel of engineering that had once filled her with pride now seemed precarious. Built not just on technological innovation, but on corporate secrecy and controlled information. How many other overrides had been implemented? How many other hazards had been reclassified as 0% risk, because addressing them properly would affect quarterly profits? Her secure messaging channel pinged when she reached her apartment. Situation accelerating. Multiple respiratory emergencies reported in Zone 7 Medical Center. Timeline revised. Critical threshold within 36 hours. Prepare for operation tonight. 1 o'clock. Shadow. Lena felt a surge of adrenaline. Things were deteriorating faster than anticipated. She sent a quick acknowledgement, then began reviewing the central data core schematics Tam had provided. If they were going to reset the algorithm tonight, she needed to know exactly what she was doing once they gained access. The hours passed in the blur of preparation. Lena studied access protocols, memorized override commands, and rehearsed the sequence of operations they would need to perform. As midnight approached, she changed into dark clothing, tucked her engineer's access card into a hidden pocket, and slipped out of her apartment. Neo-Saigon never truly slept, but the midnight cycle brought a relative quiet to the corridors and transport systems. Lena made her way to the rendezvous point, a maintenance access junction 2 levels above the central data core. Tam was already waiting. Her maintenance coveralls exchanged for a security uniform that would help them move through the restricted areas. Ready? Tam asked without preamble. Lena nodded, her mouth too dry for words. Good. Dr. Huang reports 17 new acute cases in the past 2 hours. The contamination is reaching critical levels faster than we projected. We need to move quickly. They descended through service corridors, using Lena's access card at checkpoints and Tam's security codes to bypass the more sophisticated barriers. With each level they dropped, security measures intensified. Cameras tracked their movements. Identity scanners verified their credentials. Armed guard drones hovered at intersections. Won't they be suspicious of an engineer accessing the core at this hour? Lena whispered as they approached the final security checkpoint. That's why I have this. Tam replied, handing her a datapad with an official-looking work order. Emergency recalibration of predictive safety models due to detected anomalies in Zone 7. Authorized by Deputy Operations Director Wei. Is it real? Tam's mouth quirked. The authorization code is Director Wei's login credentials were compromised months ago. He doesn't know we occasionally borrow his authority for special projects. The final checkpoint consisted of a reinforced security door with dual authentication requirements, biometric scan, and command-level authorization. Lena provided her fingerprints and retinal pattern, while Tam entered Director Wei's access codes. For a tense moment, the system processed their credentials. Then, with a soft hiss, the massive door slid open. The central data core of Aegis was breathtaking. A cavernous chamber, easily 100 meters across, housed row upon row of quantum processing units. The walls were lined with cooling systems that hummed with quiet efficiency. In the center of the room stood the primary interface terminal, a circular platform surrounded by holographic displays showing the real-time status of every system in Neo-Saigon. 2 technicians were on duty, monitoring the displays from opposite sides of the central platform. They looked up in surprise as Lena and Tam entered. Engineer Pham, one of them called, clearly confused by her presence. What brings you to core operations at this hour? Tam stepped forward, displaying the work order on her datapad. Emergency recalibration. Zone 7 anomalies. Director Wei's authorization. The technician frowned, glancing at the order. We haven't received notification of any emergency procedures. That's because it's classified level 3, Tam replied smoothly. Need to know basis only. You'll receive the proper documentation once the situation is resolved. The technician still looked skeptical. I'll need to verify this with command. Of course, Tam said, her voice pleasant. Then, with surprising speed, she pressed a small device against the technician's neck. He stiffened, then collapsed, before the second technician could react. Tam had vaulted over a console and delivered the same treatment to him. What did you do? Lena gasped. Targeted neural inhibitor, Tam explained, already dragging the unconscious technician away from the central platform. Non-lethal. They'll wake up in about an hour with a headache and no memory of the past 15 minutes. She gestured to the primary interface. We need to work fast. Security protocols will notice the irregular biometric readings from these 2 within 20 minutes. Lena rushed to the central terminal, her fingers flying across the interface as she navigated through the Aegis system architecture. This was familiar territory, similar to her monitoring station but with far greater access and control capabilities. I'm in the environmental safety protocols, she announced after a few moments. I can see the override commands for Zone 7. They've classified the chemical leak as a managed environmental variation rather than a hazardous containment failure. Can you reverse it? Tam asked, joining her at the terminal. Yes, but it will trigger alerts throughout the system. They'll know immediately that someone has tampered with the assessment parameters. That's what we want. Tam reminded her. We need the algorithm to do what it was originally designed to do. Protect people, not profits. Lena nodded and began implementing the changes, restoring the original assessment parameters and removing the corporate override commands. As she worked, warning indicators began flashing across the holographic displays. Zone 7 status rapidly shifted from green to yellow to blinking red. It's working, she said, watching as the risk assessment climbed from 0% to 87% to 93%. The algorithm is recalculating the hazard level based on current contamination readings. Suddenly, All the displays flickered. A new window appeared at the central terminal. Unauthorized parameter modifications detected. Security protocols engaged. System lockdown initiated. They've detected us sooner than I expected, Tam said, her voice tight. Someone's monitoring the core remotely. We need to complete the reset before they lock us out completely. Lena worked frantically, trying to finalize the parameter changes before the security protocols could stop them. The displays continued to flicker, and she could see access to various subsystems being revoked one by one as the remote administrators fought to regain control. Almost there, she muttered, implementing the final commands that would trigger the emergency evacuation protocols for Zone 7. Just need to activate the terminal went dark. All the holographic displays vanished. For a moment, the central data core was plunged into darkness before emergency lighting activated, bathing everything in a dim red glow. They've cut power to the interface systems, Tam said grimly. Manual override from the executive level. Did we finish in time? Lena asked, staring at the dead terminal. I don't know. The evacuation protocols might have activated before the shutdown, or they might have been interrupted mid-sequence. A new voice echoed through the chamber. They were interrupted, I'm afraid. Lena and Tam whirled to see Director Tran standing at the entrance to the core, flanked by 4 security officers in the black uniforms of Aegis Global's Private Enforcement Division. Each held a stun baton at the ready. Engineer Pham, Director Tran said, his voice conveying mild disappointment rather than anger. I had such hopes for your career. Your performance evaluations were exemplary. Management track within 2 years, executive potential within 5. Such a waste. People are dying in Zone 7, Lena replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The algorithm detected it. You overrode it. Cost-benefit analysis. Engineer Pham. The infrastructure repairs required to properly address the containment failure would impact quarterly projections by 32%. Shareholder value would decrease. Executive bonuses would be affected. He spoke as if explaining something obvious to a child. The situation in Zone 7 is being managed. Affected residents are being quietly relocated. The contamination will be addressed once the fiscal implications can be properly mitigated. 17 acute respiratory failures in the past 2 hours. Tam said coldly. How many are acceptable losses for your cost-benefit analysis? Director. Tran's gaze shifted to her, and his expression hardened. Tam Nguyen. I should have known you were involved. Still fighting the same battle after all these years. Still failing to understand that Aegis must balance safety with economic reality. I designed Aegis to protect lives. Tam replied, not corporate profits. A naive perspective. Aegis protects Neo-Saigon. Neo-Saigon exists because Aegis Global built it, funds it, maintains it. Without our economic model, there would be no city for you to save. He gestured to the security officers. Take them to detention level. Class 3 containment. No communications, no visitors. The officers moved forward, batons raised. Lena tensed, preparing for the inevitable. But Tam surprised her by laughing. You haven't changed the emergency backup protocols, have you, Tran? Still the same arrogant oversight. Always so confident in your primary systems that you neglect the fail-safes. Confusion flickered across Director Tran's face, quickly replaced by alarm as he realized what she meant. He turned to one of the security officers. Check the autonomous emergency systems, now. But it was too late. Throughout the central data core, secondary terminals were coming to life, their screens displaying a cascading series of emergency protocols being activated independently of the main interface that had been shut down. "You forgot that I built redundancies into every critical system," Tam said, watching with satisfaction as the autonomous protocols executed. "Even if the primary command interface is compromised, the safety systems will operate independently when hazard thresholds are exceeded. They're designed to assume that any attempt to prevent their operation during a confirmed emergency is itself a security breach." On the screens, they could all see it happening. Zone 7 status indicators flashing critical warnings. Evacuation alerts being transmitted to every resident. Emergency response teams being automatically dispatched. Containment systems activating to isolate the contaminated areas. "You can't stop it now," Tam continued. "Not without shutting down the entire Aegis infrastructure and plunging Neo-Saigon into darkness. Is that cost-effective, Director Tran?" Tran's face contorted with fury. "You have no idea what you've done. The disruption, the panic, the loss of public confidence. The financial implications are incalculable." "Unlike the value of human lives?" Lena asked quietly. For a moment, it seemed as though Tran might order the security officers to attack anyway. Then his professional mask reasserted itself. "Take them to detention," he repeated coldly. "This isn't over," as the officers moved to restrain them. Lena met Tam's eyes. Despite the circumstances, the older woman looked satisfied, even triumphant. They had done what they set out to do. The algorithm was once again doing what it had been designed for, protecting the people of Neo-Saigon, regardless of the cost. The detention facility was located in the deepest level of the administrative zone, a sterile white environment of locked doors and constant surveillance. Lena and Tam were separated upon arrival, placed in individual cells with nothing but a bed, a sanitation unit, and a small desk bolted to the floor. Hours passed with no contact from the outside world. Lena paced her cell, wondering what was happening in Zone 7. Had the evacuation been successful? Were the emergency medical teams treating the affected residents? What would happen to her now, after what felt like an eternity? The door to her cell slid open. A security officer motioned for her to follow. She was led to an interrogation room where Director Tran waited, looking considerably less composed than he had in the central data core. His suit was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "Sit," he commanded. Lena complied, noting that Tam was not present. "Your actions have created a crisis of unprecedented proportions." Tran began without preamble. "Zone 7 has been fully evacuated. Emergency medical facilities are overwhelmed with patients. News networks are broadcasting footage of children on respiratory support. Aegis Global's stock has fallen 28% in the past 6 hours. Despite everything," Lena felt a surge of satisfaction. The evacuation had worked. People were being treated. The truth was out. "Where is Tam?" she asked. "Tam Nguyen is no longer your concern," Tran replied dismissively. "Your concern should be the multiple criminal charges you're facing. Unauthorized access to restricted systems, tampering with critical infrastructure, endangering public safety, conspiracy to commit corporate sabotage. The minimum sentence is 15 years in a labor rehabilitation facility." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a more conversational tone. "However, Aegis Global recognizes that you were likely manipulated by Nguyen, a known technological dissident with a history of actions against corporate interests. Your record prior to this incident was exemplary. There may be a path forward that doesn't involve spending the prime years of your life in detention. Lena regarded him coolly. What path would that be? A statement. Public, recorded. Distributed to all news networks. You acknowledge that you were misled by Nguyen, that you acted without understanding the consequences. You express regret for the panic and disruption caused by the unnecessary evacuation. You affirm that Aegis Global has always prioritized resident safety, and that the situation in Zone 7 was being addressed through appropriate channels before Nguyen's interference accelerated a minor issue into a perceived crisis. And in return, reduced charges, probationary reinstatement after a suitable period, perhaps even eventual return to your previous position, though advancement opportunities would naturally be limited. Lena considered the offer. It would be the easy way out. A public apology, a period of penance, then a return to something resembling her former life. All she had to do was lie. Deny what she had seen in the logs, betray Tam, pretend that Aegis Global hadn't willfully endangered thousands of lives to protect its profit margins. What's happening in Zone 7 now? She asked, instead of answering. Tran's expression tightened. Emergency containment and decontamination procedures are underway. The affected infrastructure is being repaired. Residents will be permitted to return once safety parameters are confirmed. And the people who were affected by the contamination, the ones who are ill, who might have permanent respiratory damage, they will receive appropriate medical care, of course, paid for by Aegis Global, since the company knowingly allowed the contamination to continue when it could have been addressed weeks ago. Tran's professional veneer cracked slightly. That matter is being reviewed by legal experts. Causation is difficult to establish definitively in environmental exposure cases. I see. Lena leaned back in her chair. And the override commands in the algorithm? The ones that reclassified a lethal hazard as zero risk? Will those be permanently removed or reinstated once this particular crisis has passed? System modifications are an internal corporate matter, not subject to public disclosure. Tran's patience was clearly wearing thin. Engineer Pham, I am offering you a chance to salvage something from this situation. I suggest you consider it carefully. Lena met his gaze directly. I have a counteroffer. Tran raised an eyebrow, surprised. I'm listening. Before Tam and I were arrested, we transmitted copies of all the evidence, the original hazard assessments, the override commands, the authorization codes, everything, to multiple secure locations. If I'm not released within 24 hours, that evidence will be automatically forwarded to every news network, every regulatory agency, and every citizens' advocacy group in Neo-Saigon. It was a bluff. They hadn't had time to arrange such a failsafe before entering the central data core. But Lena had learned from Tam that sometimes perception was as powerful as reality. Tran's face remained impassive, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. Even if such evidence exists, it would be classified as stolen corporate data. Distributing it would constitute additional criminal offenses. Perhaps. Lena agreed. But once it's public, the damage to Aegis Global would be done. How much would your stock fall then? 50%? 70%? Would the company survive the regulatory investigations? The class action lawsuits from affected residents? The criminal charges against executives who authorized endangering thousands of lives? For a long moment, they stared at each other across the table, the balance of power shifting subtly between them. Finally, Tran spoke. What exactly are you proposing? Release me and Tam. Drop all charges. Allow us to monitor the remediation of Zone 7 and the treatment of affected residents. Implement permanent modifications to the algorithm to prevent future corporate overrides of safety protocols. Establish an independent oversight committee with real authority to review Aegis operations. Tran laughed, though there was no humor in it. You're in no position to make such demands. I'm in exactly that position. Lena replied calmly. Because you know I'm right. You know what Aegis Global did was wrong. You know that if the public learns the full truth, the consequences will be devastating. So you have a choice. Make meaningful changes that will protect residents going forward, or face the collapse of everything you've built. Another long silence followed. Tran studied her face, perhaps searching for signs of weakness or deception. Lena met his gaze steadily, projecting a confidence she didn't entirely feel. I will need to consult with the executive committee, Tran said finally. This decision exceeds my authority. You have 12 hours, Lena replied. After that, the evidence goes public. Tran stood. You've changed, Engineer Pham. I wouldn't have expected such ruthlessness from you. I haven't changed, Lena said quietly. I've always believed in the promise of Aegis, a system designed to keep people safe. I'm just ensuring it fulfills that promise. After Tran left, Lena was returned to her cell. The hours ticked by with excruciating slowness. She had no way of knowing if her bluff had worked, if Tam was safe, or what was happening outside the detention facility. When the door to her cell slid open again, she expected to see Tran or another security officer. Instead, it was a corporate legal representative, a thin woman in a severe gray suit. Engineer Pham, she said crisply. I'm here to inform you that all charges against you have been conditionally suspended, pending your signature on a non-disclosure agreement regarding certain proprietary Aegis systems. Lena stood slowly. And Tam Nguyen? The same arrangement has been offered to her. She has already accepted and been released. Relief flooded through her. What about the other conditions? The algorithm modifications? The oversight committee? The representative's expression revealed nothing. Those matters are being reviewed by the appropriate corporate divisions. Your immediate concern is the non-disclosure agreement. She held out a data pad. Your signature, please. Lena took the pad, scanning the document quickly. It prohibited her from discussing specific technical details of Aegis's operations. But crucially, it did not prevent her from talking about the Zone 7 incident itself, or the corporate decision-making that had led to it. A small victory, but significant. She signed. You are free to go. The representative said, taking back the pad. Your personal effects have been returned. You will be contacted regarding your employment status within 7 days. Lena was escorted to the detention facility exit, where her belongings waited in a sealed container. As the doors slid open, revealing the familiar corridors of the administrative zone, she felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. They had won, at least partially. The evacuation had happened. Lives had been saved. Some form of accountability seemed possible. But the larger battle, ensuring that Aegis truly served the people of Neo-Saigon rather than corporate interests, was far from over. Tam was waiting for her outside, looking tired but resolute. They let you go, Lena said, relief evident in her voice. They had no choice. Tam replied with a small smile. The evidence is already public. Lena blinked in surprise. What? But I was bluffing about... I wasn't. Tam's smile widened slightly. Dr. Hoang released everything to the networks an hour ago. That's why they're suddenly so eager to negotiate. Dr. Hoang is free too. They didn't arrest him. They tried, but it's difficult to arrest the doctor who's treating dozens of contamination victims while news cameras are rolling. Public opinion can be a powerful shield. They began walking together, heading toward the transport hub that would take them back to the residential zones. "What happens now?" Lena asked. "Now we monitor the cleanup. We ensure the affected residents receive proper care and compensation. We push for the oversight committee you demanded. We make sure this never happens again." Tam glanced at her. "Unless you're planning to return to your old life." Lena thought about it. Her apartment in Zone 3. Her monitoring station at Aegis Operations. The comfortable routine she had built over 5 years. The career path that had stretched before her. Predictable and secure. It all seemed so limited now. So complicit in a system that had proven itself deeply flawed. "No," she said finally. "I don't think I can go back. Not after seeing what I've seen." Tam nodded approvingly. "Good. Because we need people like you. People who understand the system from the inside, but are willing to question it, to challenge it when necessary. People who know that algorithms can be wrong." Lena added quietly, or more accurately, that the people controlling them can be wrong. "Exactly." Tam's expression turned serious. "This won't be easy. You know, Aegis Global won't simply surrender control. They'll fight back, find new ways to prioritize profit over safety. We'll need to be vigilant, persistent." "I'm ready," Lena said, surprised to find that she meant it, as they reached the transport hub. The massive screens that dominated the public spaces were displaying news reports about the Zone 7 evacuation. Footage showed emergency medical teams treating residents, hazmat crews entering the contaminated areas, corporate representatives making carefully worded statements about addressing the situation, and prioritizing resident safety. What the reports didn't show, yet, was the evidence of corporate malfeasance, the deliberate override of safety protocols, the calculated risk taken with thousands of lives. But that would come. The truth had a way of emerging, especially when there were people committed to revealing it. The algorithm had said it was safe. The algorithm had been wrong. Not because of a failure in its design or a glitch in its programming, but because humans had corrupted it, had subverted its purpose to serve their own interests. Lena's new purpose was clear: restore the integrity of the systems that kept Neo-Saigon alive. Ensure they served the people, not the profit margins. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be safe. But it was necessary. As she and Tam boarded the transport pod that would take them to Dr. Huang and the evacuated residents of Zone 7, Lena felt a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. She had always believed in the power of technology to protect and improve lives. Now she understood that this power required constant vigilance, ethical oversight, and the courage to speak truth when algorithms lied. The pod doors closed, and they began their journey through the veins of the underground city. A city that would never look quite the same to her again.